Welcome to the podcast Scattered, one person's search for the story behind scattered remains. My name is Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical anthropologist and archaeologist. In other words, I like dead people. In this podcast, I speak about searching for and the discovery and recovery of dispersed remains from outdoor contexts. I offer new perspectives and insights directly from the mouths of researchers, as well as experiences of people who work with remains. All of this aims to provide you with valuable information on a subject that isn't talked about, doesn't seem to be a priority, and that is very understudied. I hope you enjoy.
Wow, that you're recording.
I'm going to rev you up again. Okay. So I am here with my very good friend, Sarah Woodman. We're already laughing, so this is going to be good. Sarah, please introduce yourself. Tell me your current title, where you are, what you do.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Woodman. Some people may have known me as Sarah Huck. I had that last name for about 10 years. So currently the Cultural Places Officer with the Cultural Places Program at the Prince of Wales Northern Heritage Centre here in Yellowknife. My job mostly is around place names. So toponymy takes up a lot of my time. I do some work with our territory's historic sites, processing some new historic site nominations right now, which is kind of exciting. And then I also help with the archaeological permitting process. So the regulator, we have a territorial archaeologist in our program and an assessment archaeologist in our program, as well as a staffed GIS technician. And the four of us we run all of the programs that Cultural Places offers. So that's what I am doing right now in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories.
So just so that we provide anybody outside of Canada a little bit of context, this is north of the 60th parallel.
Oh yeah, it's like 62, 63 degrees north, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you're up north. So it gets damn cold.
Oh yeah, I just turned on the heat today, so.
And it's August the 4th. You've turned on the heat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we are.
So the reason I have asked Sarah to talk on the podcast today is because we did archaeology consulting together, consulting archaeology. And she was one of my very favorite assistants when we would go out into the bush. And not only did she save my ass a number of times, me being a permit holder, and she had this freaking amazing talent to read my brain. It was amazing. And so, yes, she saved my ass on a number of occasions. She has an amazing passion for archaeology. But also number two is that she learned some, I think, very hard lessons from archaeology. I learned some very hard lessons from archaeology as well, but we've both come out of it, I think, for the better. We've, I think, learned good stuff from the lessons, and when we're moving forward. So I have brought her on to talk about some of those lessons, what we've learned from archaeology, and how we're moving on from life, and what archaeology actually was, and how we've applied it. So if we could go back in time to when you discovered archaeology, tell me about that time.
Oh, well, I don't.
We're going flashback.
I can't pinpoint one.
Were you one of those people that always wanted to be an archaeologist?
Yeah, there was always a part of me, I think, that always, yeah, I can't think of there was like in my schooling when I realized I could pursue something like that, but that was distinctly different than kind of how I felt with myself. Like it's more of a personality type. I think it's how do you discover archaeology? It's kind of like like if you're someone who is like really inquisitive, you just have all of these questions and you want to know. And I think those kind of people are kind of born into archaeology. But then if you can figure out how to get into the profession through your schooling stream, then that's a different story.
So you were just curious in general, or were you curious about certain things and that led you to archaeology?
It's a combination of like a natural curiosity for history, like stuff that's come before, for environment and biology, geology, kind of all of the component language. I've always had a deep passion for languages. All of those things kind of, that's your interest area. You should walk down over to archaeology. It embodies a lot of those.
It really is sort of a melting pot of the highly curious and, anything that you can kind of lap up from other professions and disciplines and schools of thought. You bring it into archaeology and you see what works.
Yeah, there's so many facets you can explore that, that is a part of us, right? As humans. And so I think if those are your interests, definitely. But I mean, programming is pretty scarce across the country as well. And it's only getting more scarce as time goes on. So how will people find it? Will they even find it?
Yeah, then there's that. Or, yeah, I think the question that people always seem to ask is, what is the value of archaeology? Because all we're doing is looking at the past.
Well, is there not value in looking at the past? I don't understand that question. How could not looking at the past? How could it not have value? Like everyone like who has a brain, it's like, where did I come from? So I think, and especially for our communities today, and understanding and getting some sense of identity and community, and how are we related to our neighbors? How does that, it applies to social science today. It's not in our past is very much our present.
And also, how do you move forward in a productive way if you don't know what stuff you screwed up on in the past?
Yeah, I don't know. The question doesn't make sense. That's the problem. But I have heard that question before. It's not like you've never heard that question before.
Well, exactly. And that's why I'm bringing it up.
Archaeologist. And at some point in their career, especially if they were like standing in a farmer's field, they've been questioned.
Yes, usually by the farmer.
Yeah. But it's a luxury, I think. And it started off as a luxury, but to have that time to study yourself. But I mean, if you're doing other pursuits, it's just as valuable. So, I mean, it's not as obvious, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value.
So let's talk about your schooling, because you went to the University of Calgary, if memory serves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you did your bachelor there.
Yeah, over 9 years.
Sounds like me. It only took me 7 years.
Right.
And then you went to work, you started working after that. And then how long was it before you did your master's? It was a long time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like 10 years or something?
I graduated technically in 2009, but I had been working as a consulting archaeologist for 2 years prior to that. And they wouldn't, like, on the reports, they'd make sure to leave that BA off my name because you didn't get it yet. I was like, okay, put me at the bottom of the pile then. You just made it feel so bad. So then I got the BA in 09, and I didn't go back for my MA until 2015. And I did it by distance learning. It was a part-time program over 2 years.
And that part-time program was through the UK, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was through, I found out about the program through a colleague, actually. He was in some similar career slump as I was, where you couldn't really do anything on your own, so that didn't make you as valuable to consultants. You were always an ancillary and not the person producing reports so much, or the person they could really sell, right, for any development. So it gets tricky, and a lot of people, once they do their BA and they do consulting for a little bit, they usually nod off and go into something else, because there's a bit of a cap there. So 2017, I graduated with my MA, and a lot more doors opened up for me.
Right. So just, I'm going to back up just for a second so that everybody kind of gets an idea. So in Alberta, and I'm not too sure how many other, at least provinces in Canada. I don't know what the US is like.
US is mostly, you have to have some sort of thesis or MA to really get a professional level position.
All right. Yeah. So in Alberta, you need to at least have an MA, which you submit to the Alberta government, and then they give you permit holding status. And what that means is then you can hold you're then legally able to dig for historic resources in the province.
Program now.
Sorry, say again?
It's kind of a graduated program now. So you're you hold one tiny permit, and you have to complete it. It usually takes about a year, and then you can hold a couple. You have to work up to different types of permits. So you have to have different experience levels with different projects now to kind of hold certain types of permits. So it's a little more diversified and specific.
It was kind of like that when I was doing it back in 2006, but I think it's because there was a boom going on that maybe my path was a bit accelerated.
Yeah.
Throwing
people at everything in those years, I remember.
Yeah, because it only took me a few months.
Yeah, if you came out of the gate with an MA, you were thrown right into the fire in those years. And that's
pretty much how it felt too.
Yeah. That's been, you were just expected to perform with no construction knowledge or it was strange, but that's the way it was. So
but with a bachelor though, you were very restricted by.
You really are. There's not really a career path unless you somehow get a position as an administrator, or you're doing geospatial work. That's kind of where you'll top out.
So let's talk about consulting archaeology and all the trauma. Let's just get right into it, shall we?
Oh, my nerves.
So Sarah and I worked a lot in the boreal forest, which is pretty much central Alberta and up, central and north, as well as, west into the mountains and what have you. And forest, a lot of forest time. Had a lot of forest time.
Yeah, we were in the oil sands, and we did some other small projects in other places too, I think. We did some parkland work.
Yeah.
Did we ever get on the planes, you and I? We did once. We were...
Yeah.
Remember that site that was mapped, and we were driving home and we went over those bumps, and you're like, wait! And it was nowhere near where the site was supposed to be, but the sketch map.
Oh, that was out by Provost.
And then Joan wouldn't take your site for him because she's like, it's not in the right spot. And you're like, I know. I'm telling you, it's not. This is the rights that she wouldn't take your site for. So yeah, we did some prairie work too, I guess.
Yeah, just a little bit, but mostly forest.
Mostly forest, yeah.
Yeah, and everything from small surveying, going out because there's some sort of oil and gas development going in, and we had to go out and see if there's any historical resources out there to big, huge excavations.
Yes, plotting out units and baselines and those big excavation crews. It happens in the field, stays in the field. But it never does. Never does. I think my married friends could attest to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say we worked a lot of hours.
Oh yeah. 3 hours.
I remember looking at my timesheet when we were up in Fort Mac working that excavation total, and I was doing. There was a couple of weeks where I was doing 100 hours a week.
Oh yeah, easy. Yeah, well, I worked forestry jobs where you had to like pull your 12-hour day, and then you had to write all the reports at night. You had to like do all the interim reports and submit them.
Yeah.
So it was just, walking all day and working all day, like physical labor, and then computer work at night. That was, I think, on those big excavations, was good because I was also working those hours, but I needed a distraction. So it would be like cataloging or washing artifacts and stuff like that. And at that time, it was good for me, but you can't sustain that, right? Like the expectation is that you do though. If the work is there, you got to go. If the work is not, they'll let you go.
And I think that's just it. You're supposed so to be hard.
You're supposed to be grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just it. And you were told time and time again that you are replaceable. You are disposable. Either you work and you work these hours, you work this hard, or we will find somebody else who will do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely the context I remember. Throughout, like, I think at my last place of employment, they are talking about, incorporating healthy life balance. But I mean, it's really hard to do that when you have people in your company from like a spectrum of different responsibilities, So like I can't commit like as much time. And I know like any parent with young kids, the expectations, right? And then you're kind of resented, like getting off because you have kids or something. So it's a double-edged sword. And
it is.
They want blood.
Yep.
Doesn't matter which way you spin it.
It's difficult to work so hard for something that you are passionate about, but then for everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. Well, maybe it is everybody, because management, leadership, the people in authority are telling you you're disposable, you don't matter.
Not to like, it's kind of weird. It's done in a very backhanded way. I think in the beginning it was very blatant. Like I remember being at FMA and being blatantly told these things about my replaceability and how lucky I was to work for the scraps that they were giving me, and and the experience I was getting and all of this for my like hours of work. Like I just poured my heart into it because you love it and you're interested and you want to learn, but they're profiting off of that. So yeah. But then as time went on, those things weren't as cool anymore. Like you couldn't do that. And a lot of little companies got bought up by bigger companies. And then there's the, that incorporation of corporate culture. So instead of saying it, you couldn't say it anymore, right? And then you're working in amongst, other professionals that are, in all honesty, really much more respected than you are, like a biologist or a veg scientist or aquatics person. Like I know when companies merged, they were making like quite a bit more an hour than we were for a lot less work.
I remember that was a very eye-opening experience for me. I used to do my own cost estimates for when we got awarded proposals. And I would
Yeah,
do up a cost
yeah,
estimate and I would see what a biologist was being charged out at. And I'm like, wait a
yeah.
second, this biologist only has a bachelor. I've got a master's, but you're charging out, their charge out rate
They're
is twice what mine is.
it's considered, it's more valued, right? So the
Yeah,
value on that is placed different than on archaeology or even historical resources in a general sense. So yeah,
and
I
then
think a lot of us met that in those years when a lot of that, those bigger companies were swallowing the smaller ones.
mhm. And I think that
Now
makes
most
a
big
good point.
companies have something, right?
Yeah.
So it's changed the culture a bit that way as well. You're either an archaeologist that's like cool from a small consulting company, or you're with the big machine, the corporate, wheel. So it's kind of still kind of negative either way.
I don't know. I think there are pluses and minuses on both sides of it.
There are. That's the thing, right? They both
Yeah.
have their own nuances. So
But I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about, what is the purpose of studying archaeology where we're just looking at the past, and what is the value of it? I mean, if our charge out rate is, 50% of a biologist, well, then that shows you how people view archaeology and historical assessments. It shows you that they're not valuing the historical resources and they're not valuing the people who assess or help preserve and conserve the historical resources.
yeah, that has a lot to do with just the way our overall society systems
Mm,
are set up, and how we value. I don't know if you've ever heard it before, but I've always I always had a hard time with it, where like if you're a North American archaeologist, somehow what you're doing is not interesting or not important because it has to do with indigenous people. And I think that carries through in what you're charging, and why the expectations on us is usually to do two different jobs, and it's to be an anthropologist and an archaeologist. It got to the point, like probably mid-career, where you're having community representatives with you all the time, but you're expected to be that liaison, right? That cultural liaison. You really haven't been trained for it. So
absolutely. Yeah.
but it's because it's just not valued. And even the community members who were part of the projects were not valued. They were being paid, but they weren't being valued. And how do we know that? It's because they never got to contribute to an assessment. So I think that whereas if you have someone that may be considered more hard science, our Western society values that more. So I think that really translated to consulting. It's just a reflection of the world we live in.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it's done on purpose, and it's just the way it is in market economy.
And it's difficult being in the discipline because, you're young, you go to university or whatever, and you love what you're doing. You have all this curiosity, you're brimming with enthusiasm. You just want to, you know, do some good in the world. And then suddenly you get thrown into this profession.
Really complicated, complex situation. You're told it's very simple and straightforward, but I mean, we wouldn't have these big development projects in the news if it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. The world outside of school is a much different A more complicated world.
Yeah. It has a different context.
Yeah.
In school, you're very much in a bubble. You're interacting with people who are like you, who write things the way you do, who say things the way you do, who think the same ways that you do, right? You're very much in a bubble. But when you get out and you're practicing as a profession and you're interacting with all of these different players, like even going out and working with biologists or being an assistant on that is a different experience that you're gaining value from, and you're learning how to do things and look at things in a different way and how to communicate. You got to figure it out. Or if you're talking to a heavy equipment operator, you're fumbling your way through these situations with no preparation whatsoever. There's no internship.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that's just it. I mean, I don't know about you, but my mentorship was mostly about the mechanics, where to shovel test, writing up your notes so you can do a report. It wasn't about the humanist part of supervising your own team, dealing with, the oil and gas guys that you come across, the pipeline welders.
Or when you go into H2S and you don't know half of the vocabulary in there. That's a reflection of that, right? You're out of your element.
Yeah. Or even,
you haven't been trained for this,
Yeah.
You've been trained in academia, and it's very theoretical. It's not like a trade school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not just academia, but academic archaeology. So you've got all this archaeology jargon that is all, theoretical. And then you get out into real life, and you're very often dealing with people who maybe have a high school education. Not only do they not know archaeology, they do not know academia. So you have to find a way to not only communicate with them, but then
language.
Yeah.
You have to, they're different languages.
Very different. And you have to work pretty much towards a common goal, even if you don't know that you're working towards a common goal.
Yeah. In a lot of ways. And you can be put on teams. I know I've been put on teams with all kinds of bizarre people. Like I was working with like military militia people on a project. I was getting helicoptered into an area and I needed to be escorted by like a militia trained security detail. I never talked to people like that in my career or regular life, but it was a different language that you just got to wing it. Pardon the plain helicopter pun, but
putting the anthropology back in archaeology.
You can't, they're not separate. They're really, and I didn't learn that until my field school in 2010. I was very much a material archaeologist in my early experience of it. I was so interested in just like how things were made and like what they looked like and just this type of things you could find, and that like someone so long ago and people did different things, and or if they did some things that were the same in some areas, like it was just all so was really focused on the material of things. But again, when it comes back to the value of archaeology, it's about more, it's about more than that. And that's when I guess I discovered I was an anthropologist. I never discovered I was an archaeologist, but I discovered I was an anthropologist at field school.
And how did you feel about that, Sarah?
I feel guilty. I felt guilty about it because I felt selfish, that I was like more interested in what I was interested in. I never bothered to kind of check with other people. It was like, I don't know, I felt young and immature about it. Like I was looking at it. And then, when the light goes on and you realize how much more you can learn with context, it's like kind of a pillar of archaeology is understanding context. But I had no idea of my own context within the discipline of anthropology, really. So, and how much it meant, and like even now in my career, I really just loving the linguistic part of archaeology and what it can teach us. Like language artifacts are cool too. I just can't touch them. So, yeah, I guess it's always a journey, right? It's always a journey.
Yeah. I'm guessing that part of the reason that you wanted to do an MA was to break through some of that ceiling that you were encountering because you only had a bachelor and you wanted to continue in archaeology in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it was like I had to pay the price. I had to pay someone to get my gatekeeper ticket in order to do what I already knew how to do, what I was already pretty good at, I thought. But I had to get that formal accreditation or I would never be taken serious by anyone in the market, which I like eating and living under a roof. So I have to, you're confined. You don't have many choices. Do something else or get an MA.
And did you want to continue on with consulting archaeology?
I thought I did. But I think by the time I finished my MA, I was growing a lot more interested in public engagement and getting other people as excited about archaeology as I was. And, I started doing a lot more public outreach and more public-y events because I really wanted to share my passion. And I see there's a gap, like a lot of people didn't know about what I did. That's where I ended up leaning towards. So ending up in the position I am in right now is a really natural fit for me.
So then let's talk about what you're currently doing and what consulting archaeology has, I guess, given you so that you can fill this current position and feel comfortable and prosperous and successful.
Oh, I wish I could answer that. I think I was in a canoe when I asked my supervisor, like, why did you pick me? Like, I never really understood. Like, there had to be way more qualified people,
What did they say?
And he said it came down to my field experience. As a result of not having an MA for a long time, I did mostly field work. And I preferred that I was completely content doing most of the field work. I just needed to level up to make sure if no one else could take me in the field, I could take myself, essentially. But yeah, it was basically, so in case he needed me to help him because all of the projects here are quite remote. So they wanted someone that was going to be comfortable in the bush, that they didn't have to worry about when they needed extra hands for the archae projects. That was the gist of it.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, I mean, as a person who has a bachelor, you're pretty much confined to being a shovel bum.
Yeah, I dug many holes and I still love digging holes.
And you can dig a hole in a skirt.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
I have to bring that up. I mean, the amount of times that I heard you just want to wear a skirt in the field.
Yeah, because I could rock it. I just so comfortable in the field. And it's a very happy place for me. So it's a really healing atmosphere. I think more people should work outside. Maybe relieve a lot of tension. I don't know. But if you're not constrained by all of the things a permit holder is, because otherwise it's actually a fairly stressful situation when you're responsible for everything and you're in remote areas where absolutely everything will go wrong. You just
Yes.
and then
everything does go wrong.
Explain it to your superiors who haven't spent a whole bunch of time outside, so their expectations are slightly unreasonable considering the conditions. So, not pointing fingers or anything, but yeah, that was it. But the other helpful part is I was learning language. So I didn't realize it, but I think I'm okay. I think I'm pretty good with languages because I am trying to pick up some local dialects here to understand a lot of the place naming. And my colleagues think I'm absolutely crazy for even attempting it. But I think it's really important. So I took a year of the local Tlichon lessons so that I could understand the places here better and on a different level, because I do speak another language, Bengali, and I understand things in a different way in that language. So to really understand heritage, I don't think we can leave out language, and we often do.
Yes.
I mean, Quebecers would agree with me, but we've never really given the chance for other people to make that connection in our heritage and how we value it and where we see it. We see it in language too. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I actually remember having a small conversation with Ed McCullough about how language shapes the way we see the world.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of papers on that now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think a lot of archaeologists are really engaged with the communities and the places they're studying and try to learn the language, which would be beneficial to them, I think. Because if you get to know the people a little bit more, you have a better understanding of what the people before them would have been like. It's something. And then it helps build bridges and relationships, which put more layers on the work that you're doing than just collecting sharp rocks.
Right, because before we got on the call, you were saying that in consulting archaeology, it seems like we were just going out and doing the project and collecting the data, writing up the report, and moving on to the next thing. We never went back and followed up to see what happened.
Yeah, we're we do these things, and it's all based around the scientific method. You have a hypothesis. I think there might be a site here for these reasons. You go and investigate it. There's either a site there or there isn't, and then you need to explain yourself. But in the case of a consulting archaeologist, on top of that, they're also making recommendations for development and development strategies. So how those recommendations impact heritage resources, you never go back and check. So if you had like an adaptive management plan for a mining project and you did it 10 years ago and you did all this work and you ground truth parts of it, that report gets written up, it gets filed with your regulator. The archaeological site data is put in a database so other researchers, should anything else happen in that area, can access what you know of that area, which is great. But the government never goes back to the company and the report and assess if those predictions or what we're doing was making an impact. There's never a review of anything. So you never really complete the loop from your scientific process, because the conclusion, there's no discussion. There's a write-up, it's approved, and it's put on a shelf. So did those things that we did work? What worked? What didn't work? What can we learn from it? We never close that loop. So it's a very bureaucratic process. We're doing it to move other things along. We're checking a box.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then, artifacts that get boxed up and they go to museums and then they take up space and then taxpayers pay for that space. But you're digging up stuff. You're not doing anything with the value of it. It's hard to share the information. It's hard to engage with community members. There's no space or process for any of that. And that's what brings the value to the heritage resource. Like, for example, when we were in the oil sands, we had that really cool CMT. And yeah, I just said culturally modified tree and boreal forest in the same breath, but it was a trailblaze. But it was also on that multi-component site. It had been used for generations and generations. And that tree, because we dug around it, it was cut out and it was wrapped up. And the intent was to send it to the community, but we had to send it back to our lab to get a cookie of it because we took it in winter conditions, because that was all the time we had because of the project schedule. So the point was to send it back to the community because we had talked to some community members and they did want it back, and they wanted to use it and save it and show their kids and stuff. So we essentially extracted the value out, but it ended up sitting under those stairs in that office for years. I don't even know when or if it was moved or what happened to it, but I do know it never went back to the community. And then what's the value in doing the work?
Yeah, that's tough, especially when a destructive method is used to extract that value for the science, and it essentially destroys the artifact, or at least minimizes the value that the community would get from it. Yeah, who wins in that?
Well, it becomes a bureaucratic process, right? Because the tree was thought to have value, it was taken. But the value was to the community, not to the underneath of the stairs of that particular office. So there's none of that's built into consulting archaeology, and to me, that's closing the loop. You have to give something to the place that you're taking things from. So, and I mean, that concept exists in Indigenous culture, where you take something, you leave something, you give gifts to the water. If you find an antler, you leave some tobacco for it. Like, this is a balancing relationship, and we have to kind of do that as well, I think. But it's not built into the regulatory process. And if you're not made to do it, you won't do it.
That might also be part of the history of perhaps anthropology in general in North America, where
it's
anthropologists just go in. Yeah, they go in and they extract, they gather the data in community, whether it's by skeletal material, by artifacts, they take and
stories.
Then, they store it, they sit on it, and
they get credited for it too, right? They're the one that gets the credit. And I mean, that's complained of a lot now, especially, which is really good to get that pushback. But I mean, I read this really amazing MA done, I think it was out of the University of Toronto, and this lady, she was living up actually in the Northwest Territories in the Gwich'in area of Fort Good Hope, and she was asking about that mad trapper story, and then the local people were like, we can tell you the real story, because there's like 3 different stories. There's a very romanticized American, he's a hero, he's making it on his own, he's and then there's the very Canadian proper, the police got him because he wasn't following the rules. And then there's the very Indigenous perspective, which was like, we actually helped you get him, you guys didn't even write about us. There's this great story, and we were like, they were really proud of, like, they supplied the search. They fed the people. They gave them like they showed them where to go. They helped track them. They did, and they're so like, because for them the important thing was the ability to help and provide supplies. Like, that's a very prestigious and respectful ability to have. So they have a whole different viewpoint as well. They're like, they wouldn't have done it with us. We're such great people. We were able to feed them and live ourselves. So there's three different stories. And when she first went up there to talk to Ms. Quitchen, they asked her, like, why do you want to study us? Why don't you study yourself? What do you think about yourself? You don't even know about treaty. And she was right. She was right. Look at your own society structure. Why don't you study that? And it's important to look at yourself and see that in the like when you're doing archaeology, you're part of the context. What you're choosing is important. How you write it up, everything you do is your own context. So you have to understand where you're coming from. So your own biases. So if you want it to be as subjective as you claim it is, which I don't think archaeology is subjective at all.
That's a whole other topic conversation.
That's a whole other problem. Yeah, and it comes from a viewpoint and a culture. So yeah, we have to really look at how we're engaging with this system when we're consulting too. What impact are you leaving? What impact, like, what you went into that community? What did you do? What did you contribute? What did you help with? Those are the things I think that would close that gap a little bit more, out of the more trying to be like an engineer. We can't just tick boxes in archaeology. It's more. There's people involved.
And I think that would go a long way to helping to repair a lot of the damaged relationships.
Oh, yeah. Can't blame it, though. Holy cow.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that was
my house and treated me like that. I would, yeah, there's a lot of work. A lot of work that needs to be done for sure.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think that's a really good starting point.
I've like people get treated really poorly for no reason other than that they're from a community. That's just crazy. But that happens all the time when projects go through. You're there for a short time, you take what you need to do, and you just move on.
Mm-hmm.
And like for us, we spend a lot of time, like when you're an archaeologist, you spend a lot of time with people. They could be like your own people that you're familiar with, that you've worked with for years, that you've gone to school with. They could be like a bear monitor with a totally different background and like something completely different. And then you're spending like 12 hours a day, every single day, days on end. Sometimes projects go on for years. Like you get to know people and it does become personal. So you can't take the anthropology out of the archaeology, but there's no space for it in the consulting process right now.
Yeah.
And it's not valued.
I almost want to go deep on that and say that we're kind of denying our humanity.
Right? Absolutely. I've had people actually say that to me.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Like, remind me to have fun and stop being so serious. Stop, like, I would just work so hard, I would concentrate really hard and try to do like everything perfect, make sure I had everything. I would just put all my energy. And then usually it'd be an elder or something. Like, why so serious? Or they would say something to make me laugh or just remind me that I was in that moment, that we were in a beautiful place and connections were happening, and it was a good day, and everyone had what they needed and were doing well. And like, you need to be humbled sometimes and remember your humanity.
If you want to learn more about consulting archaeology in Canada, and not that romanticized version you see in Indiana Jones, although who doesn't like Indiana Jones, then consider picking up my book, Memoirs of a Reluctant Archaeologist, available in print and ebook from most major booksellers. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. Please leave a rating or review and share this episode and podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues.